3 faces. Identical. Frozen in time behind a cracked Polaroid that shouldn't exist. October 13th, 1989. Riverside, Connecticut. A perfect autumn afternoon where the leaves burned gold and crimson, where the air smelled of wood smoke and possibility, where 3 8-year-old boys walked home from school along a route they'd traveled 100 times before. Daniel, Christopher, Matthew. 3 names their mother would scream into the darkness for the next 35 years. They vanished between the corner of Elmwood Avenue and their front door. A distance of exactly 4 blocks. 7 minutes on foot. An infinity of unanswered questions. No witnesses saw them taken. No cars screeched away. No struggle disturbed the fallen leaves carpeting the sidewalk. They simply ceased to exist, as if reality itself had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. The police searched for 6 months, dragged the river, combed the woods, interrogated every registered offender within 50 miles. They found nothing. Not a shoe, not a backpack, not a single thread of evidence. The case went cold in 1994. The files gathered dust. The mother grew old waiting for a knock on her door that never came. But last month, a young couple renovating an old house on Pinecrest Drive discovered something behind a sealed bedroom wall. Something that had been deliberately hidden. Something that would rip open a case everyone assumed was lost to time. What they found didn't just shock the small town of Riverside. It shocked the entire nation. Because 35 years after 3 identical boys vanished into thin air, someone finally learned the truth about what happened that October afternoon. And the truth was so much worse than anyone imagined. Before we step into the darkness behind that wall, do me a favor. Subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. Hit that notification bell. Because what you're about to hear will haunt you long after this video ends. And you'll want to be here when we uncover the next buried truth that nobody wants found. Now let's begin. Marcus and Sophia Chin weren't looking for a mystery when they bought the house at 847 Pinecrest Drive. They were looking for a deal. And in the overheated real estate market of 2024, the price seemed too good to be true. A 4-bedroom colonial built in 1968. Hardwood floors beneath the stained carpet. Original crown molding hidden under decades of neglect. The bones were good. The realtor insisted. It just needed love. What she didn't mention, or perhaps didn't know, was that the house had stood empty for 21 years. That the previous owner, a man named Harold Vance, had died alone in the master bedroom in 2003, and that nobody had lived there since. Marcus Chun was 34, an architect with an eye for potential and a budget that demanded compromise. Sophia was 32, an interior designer who saw beauty where others saw only decay. Together, they'd renovated 3 properties in 5 years. This would be their forever home, they told each other. The place where they'd raise the family they'd been planning. The first 3 weeks of renovation were unremarkable. They ripped out the avocado green appliances that screamed 1970s, tore down the wood paneling that made every room feel like a tomb, pulled up carpets that released clouds of dust thick enough to taste. The house revealed itself slowly, like someone learning to trust again. But it was the master bedroom closet that changed everything. Marcus noticed it on a Tuesday morning in late September. He was measuring for new shelving when something struck him as wrong. The closet ran along the north wall, but according to the blueprint, it should have extended another 3 feet. He measured again, then measured the exterior wall from outside. The numbers didn't match. There were 3 feet of space that simply didn't exist, at least not in any accessible way. Sophia joined him, tape measure in hand. They calculated and recalculated. The math was irrefutable. There was a void behind the closet wall. A deliberate void. Marcus ran his hands along the drywall, searching for seams. It took him 20 minutes to find it, a perfectly concealed cut running floor to ceiling, then across the top and back down. Someone had created a false wall and hidden it with textured paint and careful matching. Should we open it? Sophia asked, her voice uncertain. Maybe it's just old insulation or something. But they both knew it wasn't insulation. You don't seal off a 3-foot cavity with surgical precision just to hide foam and fiberglass. Marcus retrieved a crowbar from his toolbox. The metal felt cold in his hands, heavier than it should. He positioned it at the seam and looked at Sophia one last time. She nodded. The wall resisted. Then, with a crack that echoed through the empty house, it gave way. Dust exploded into the afternoon light streaming through the bedroom window. Marcus coughed, waving his hand in front of his face. When the air cleared, they both saw it. A space. Narrow and deep. And it wasn't empty. 3 backpacks hung on hooks that had been mounted directly to the studs. Even through the dust, Marcus could see the designs. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. The fabric was faded but intact, preserved by decades of darkness and stale air. Below the backpacks, a small wooden shelf. And on that shelf, arranged with almost ceremonial care, were items that made Sophia's breath catch in her throat. 3 lunch boxes. Metal, rectangular, each with a name written in permanent marker across the top in a child's unsteady hand. Daniel, Christopher, Matthew. Sophia reached out, then pulled her hand back as if the lunch boxes might burn her. Marcus, she whispered. What is this? He didn't answer. He was staring at something else. A Polaroid camera, old and bulky, sitting on the shelf like it had been waiting for them. And beside it, a single photograph. Marcus picked up the photo with trembling fingers. 3 boys. Identical in every way. The same sandy brown hair. The same spray of freckles across their noses. The same gap-toothed smiles. They wore matching striped shirts, blue and white, and they had their arms around each other in that unself-conscious way children do before the world teaches them to be separate. Sophia leaned in to look. At the bottom of the Polaroid, in the white border where people used to write dates and names, someone had written in blue ink, October 12, 1989. The day before the photo was taken would be October 13th. Oh my God, Sophia breathed. Marcus, look. She'd opened one of the backpacks. Inside were school supplies, folders, pencils, a math workbook with problems half completed in careful printing, and laminated to the front pocket of the backpack, a school ID card. Daniel Holloway, age 8, grade 3, Pinewood Elementary School. Sophia opened the second backpack. Another ID card. Christopher Holloway, same age, same grade, same school. The third backpack confirmed what they already knew. Matthew Holloway, Triplets. Marcus and Sophia stood in the dusty bedroom, the afternoon sun painting long shadows across the floor, holding the belongings of 3 children who had vanished decades before they were born. We need to call the police, Marcus said finally. Right now. But Sophia wasn't listening. She'd found something else on the shelf, pushed back into the shadows. A small envelope, yellowed with age, unsealed. Inside were 3 ribbons, the kind you tie in a little girl's hair, except these weren't delicate or pretty. They were worn, frayed at the edges, and they smelled faintly of perfume even after all these years. A mother's ribbons, perhaps. A mother's hope, sealed away in darkness. Sophia turned the envelope over. Written on the back in a different handwriting, neat and controlled, for when they come home. She showed Marcus. They looked at each other, and in that moment, they both understood. This wasn't just a hidden space. This was a shrine, or a confession, or perhaps both. And somewhere out there, someone knew what had happened to Daniel, Christopher, and Matthew Holloway. Someone knew, and they'd sealed that knowledge behind a wall for 35 years. While Marcus called 911, Sophia sat on the bedroom floor with her laptop, the photograph of the 3 boys propped against the wall beside her. She typed into the search bar, Holloway Triplets missing 1989 Connecticut. The results loaded instantly. Hundreds of them. News articles. Missing children databases. Cold case forums where amateur detectives argued theories in all caps. The Holloway Triplets weren't just a local tragedy. They were a legend. Sophia clicked on the first news article, archived from the Riverside Daily Chronicle, dated October 15, 1989. Triple tragedy. Holloway triplets vanish without trace. The article was accompanied by the same photograph she held in her hand. The three boys, smiling, unaware that in less than 24 hours they would become ghosts. She read aloud, though Marcus had stepped into the hallway to talk to the 911 dispatcher. Daniel Christopher and Matthew Holloway, age 8, disappeared Friday afternoon while walking home from Pinewood Elementary School. The boys were last seen at approximately 3:47 p.m. by a neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Morrison, who waved to them as they passed her house on Elmwood Avenue. They never arrived home. Their mother, Catherine Holloway, reported them missing at 4:15 p.m. By 5:30 p.m., Riverside Police had launched a full-scale search operation involving over 100 volunteers. By midnight, the search had expanded to neighboring towns. By dawn, it had become every parent's worst nightmare. Sophia scrolled down. Another article from a week later. No leads in Holloway case, police baffled. And another from a month later. Riverside mourns as search for triplets scaled back. Then one from December 1989. Holloway family holds candlelight vigil. They're still out there. The articles continued for years. 1990, 1991, 1992. Each one shorter than the last. Each one more resigned to the possibility that the boys would never be found. Until finally, in 1994, Holloway case officially goes cold. Sophia found a longer feature article from 1995, published on the anniversary of the disappearance. It included interviews with the family, with the investigators, with the town that had been forever changed by the vanishing of 3 innocent boys. The mother's quote made Sophia's throat tighten. People tell me I should move on. They tell me I should accept that my boys are gone. But a mother knows. In here, and here the article noted that Mrs. Holloway placed her hand over her heart. In here I feel them. They're still out there. Someone knows what happened. Someone has to know. And I will never stop asking until I get an answer. Sophia clicked on another link. A missing persons database. 3 entries, all identical except for the names and the tiny distinguishing details that made each boy unique despite their identical faces. Daniel Holloway, small scar above right eyebrow from falling off monkey bars. Preferred Batman. Christopher Holloway, birthmark on left shoulder blade. Preferred Spider-Man. Matthew Holloway, slightly taller than his brothers by half an inch. Preferred Superman. The entry listed their height, weight, eye color, hair color. What they were wearing the day they disappeared. Jeans, striped shirts, red sneakers. What they were carrying. Their school backpacks, lunchboxes, a week's worth of homework they'd never complete. And at the bottom of each entry, a single heartbreaking line. Last seen October 13th, 1989. Still missing. If you have any information, please contact Riverside Police Department. Sophia heard Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, phone still in his hand. Police are on their way, he said. They told us not to touch anything else. They're treating it as an active crime scene. Sophia nodded, but didn't look away from her screen. Marcus, listen to this. The police questioned over 200 people. They investigated every registered sex offender within 100 miles. They searched the woods, the river, every abandoned building in 3 counties. They found nothing. Not one shred of evidence. Until now. Who owned this house in 1989? Marcus asked. Sophia typed rapidly. Property records were public. It took her less than a minute to find it. Harold Vance, she read. Purchased the property in 1985. Lived here until his death in 2003. Never married. No children. She scrolled down. Oh God. What? Harold Vance worked at Pinewood Elementary School. He was the janitor. The room seemed to grow colder. Marcus looked at the backpacks hanging on the wall, at the lunch boxes with their careful labels, at the photograph of 3 smiling boys who'd walked through the doors of a school where Harold Vance pushed him up and had access to every hallway, every classroom, every child. They questioned him. Sophia continued, reading the old police reports that had been digitized and uploaded to a cold case website. He was one of the first people they interviewed because he worked at the school. But he had an alibi. According to the principal, he was working until 6 p.m. that day. He was cleared. But he wasn't cleared, Marcus said quietly. looking at the hidden room. He was never cleared at all. Sophia clicked on another link. An obituary from 2003. Harold Vance, 62, dies at home. It was brief. Perfunctory. The kind of obituary they write for people who die alone with no one to remember them fondly. Harold Vance, longtime janitor at Pinewood Elementary School, passed away peacefully at his home on Wednesday. He is survived by no immediate family. A private memorial will be held at Riverside Cemetery. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Riverside Public Library. Peacefully, Sophia thought. He died peacefully in this house, in this bedroom, probably 20 feet from where he'd hidden the belongings of 3 children he'd stolen from the world. And nobody knew. For 19 years after his death, nobody knew. The mother, Sophia said suddenly. Catherine Holloway. Is she still alive? More searching. Public records. Phone directories. Social media. And there she was. Catherine Holloway, age 67, still living in Riverside. Still living in the same house where she'd waited for her sons to come home that October evening 35 years ago. The house where she'd set the table for 5 and had to put away 3 plates when darkness fell, and her boys never walked through the door. Sophia found a recent photo from a local newspaper. A charity event for missing children. Catherine stood in the background, older now, her hair white, her face carved by decades of grief, but her eyes still sharp, still searching. We have to tell her, Sophia whispered. Before the police do, before the news crews show up, we have to tell her that we found something. That after 35 years, there's finally evidence. Marcus knelt beside his wife. The police will tell her. No. Sophia's voice was firm. We found her boys' backpacks. We're holding the only photograph she probably hasn't seen. We have to be the ones. It's only right. Outside, sirens approached. The police were coming. Soon the house would be flooded with investigators and forensic teams and crime scene tape. Soon the quiet discovery would become a media circus. But for now, for just these last few moments, Marcus and Sophia sat in the dusty bedroom with 3 backpacks and a photograph and the ghost of a question that had haunted a mother for 35 years. What happened to my boys? And now, finally, someone might be able to answer. But what they were about to discover in the rest of Harold Vance's house would prove that the hidden room was just the beginning. The backpacks and photograph were breadcrumbs leading to something far darker. And in the basement, behind a door that had been concealed for decades, waited evidence that would turn a missing persons case into something else entirely. Something unforgivable. Detective Lisa Chin arrived at 8:47, Pinecrest Drive at 4:47 p.m., exactly 31 minutes after Marcus's 911 call. She came with 2 patrol officers, a forensic photographer, and an evidence collection kit that looked more like a fishing tackle box than law enforcement equipment. She was 42, born in the year the Holloway boys disappeared, and she'd grown up hearing their story like other children heard fairy tales. In Riverside, the missing triplets were legend and warning both. Don't talk to strangers. Don't take shortcuts through the woods. Don't become another unsolved mystery that parents whisper about when they think their children aren't listening. Lisa had joined the Riverside Police Department specifically because of cases like this. The cold ones. The forgotten ones. The ones where families grew old waiting for answers that never came. And now, perhaps, here was an answer. She documented everything. The false wall. The hidden space. The backpacks, still hanging like children might return any moment to claim them. The lunch boxes with their faded names. The Polaroid camera. The photograph. She bagged each item with careful reverence, labeling and cataloging, building a chain of evidence that would stand up in court if there was anyone left to prosecute. The homeowner, she said to Marcus and Sophia, who watched from the hallway. Harold Vance. What do you know about him? Not much, Marcus admitted. The realtor said he died in 2003. Lived alone. No family. He was a school janitor, Sophia added. At Pinewood Elementary, where the boys went to school. Lisa's pen stopped moving. She looked up sharply. That wasn't in the original case file. Or, if it was, nobody made the connection. He was questioned, Sophia said. I found it online. But he had an alibi. Alibis can be broken, Lisa said. Especially 35-year-old ones. She made a phone call. Marcus and Sophia couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but they heard Lisa's side. I need everything on Harold Vance. Yes, that Harold Vance. I don't care if it's Saturday. Pull whoever you need. And call Catherine Holloway. Tell her I'm coming to see her tonight. Tell her we found something. She ended the call and looked at Marcus and Sophia. I need to search the rest of this house. Basement, attic, garage, everywhere. If he hid this, he might have hidden more. We haven't been in the basement yet, Marcus said. The door was locked and we haven't found the key. Then we'll make a key, Lisa said, and retrieved a crowbar from one of the patrol officers' trunks. But before they descended into the basement, before they discovered what else Harold Vance had concealed in his house of secrets, a car pulled into the driveway. An old Toyota Camry, silver, with a dent in the passenger door and a bumper sticker that read, Never forget, never give up. Lisa recognized the car. Recognized the woman who stepped out. Catherine Holloway hadn't waited for Lisa to come to her. She'd heard the police were at the old Vance house. She'd driven over immediately, her heart pounding a rhythm she'd felt 1,000 times before. Hope, fear, a drum that had beaten in her chest for 35 years. She was 67, but looked older, the way grief ages you in ways that time alone cannot. Her hair was white and pulled back in a loose bun. Her hands, when she folded them in front of her, trembled slightly. But her eyes were steady, sharp, still searching after all these years. Mrs. Holloway, Lisa said gently. I was going to come see you. I know, Catherine said. Her voice was soft but firm, the voice of someone who'd learned to speak through pain. But I couldn't wait. You found something. My neighbor's son is a dispatcher. He called me. Said something about my boys. She looked past Lisa, at the house, at the windows that reflected the dying afternoon light. Harold's house, she said. I always wondered. Always felt something about him was wrong. Why didn't you report your suspicions? Lisa asked, though her tone held no judgment, only curiosity. I did, Catherine said. I told the police in 1989 that Harold gave me a strange feeling. That he watched my boys too closely when he thought I wasn't looking. But he had an alibi. He was at work. The principal confirmed it. So they told me I was a grieving mother looking for someone to blame, and maybe I was, but I was right too. She took a step toward the house. What did you find? Lisa hesitated, then decided Catherine deserved the truth without filters or gentle cushioning. She'd been lied to enough by time and false hope. They're backpacks, Lisa said, hidden behind a false wall in the master bedroom. School IDs, homework, personal items, and a photograph. Catherine's hand went to her mouth. For a moment, Lisa thought she might collapse. Marcus moved forward instinctively, ready to catch her, but Catherine steadied herself against the car. Can I see? She whispered. Lisa retrieved the photograph from an evidence bag. She held it carefully, showing Catherine but not releasing it. We need to preserve the evidence, but I can show you. Catherine looked at the Polaroid, at her 3 boys, frozen in time, forever 8 years old, forever smiling, forever together. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't make a sound. She simply stared at the photograph, as if she could will her sons back into existence through sheer force of love. I took this picture, she finally said, her voice breaking. October 12, 1989. The day before they disappeared. They were so excited because I'd promised them ice cream after dinner. We had a good day. A perfect day. I remember thinking how lucky I was. She touched the edge of the evidence bag, as close as she could get to touching her children. I had this photograph, she continued. The original. I kept it on my nightstand. But it disappeared a few weeks after the boys did. I thought I'd lost it in all the chaos, all the police interviews and searches and reporters. I tore my house apart looking for it. I thought if I lost that picture, I'd lose the last piece of them I had. He took it, Lisa said quietly. Harold Vance. He must have taken it from your house. But why? Catherine looked up, confused, desperate. Why take their photograph? Why hide their backpacks? What did he do to my boys? That's what we're going to find out, Lisa promised. Mrs. Holloway, I need you to stay out here while we search the rest of the house. But I promise you, if there are answers in there, we'll find them. Catherine nodded. She sat down on the hood of her car, the same car she'd driven around Riverside 35 years ago with flyers in the passenger seat and hope dying slowly in her chest. And she waited, as she'd been waiting for 35 years, for someone to finally tell her what happened to Daniel, Christopher, and Matthew. The basement door was solid oak, original to the house, with a deadbolt lock that had rusted into place. Lisa knocked first, a professional habit, as if whatever waited below might answer. When only silence responded, she used a crowbar. The lock gave way with a metallic shriek. The door swung open on hinges that screamed from decades without oil. Cold air rushed up from below, carrying the smell of earth and old water and something else, something chemical and wrong. Lisa descended first, flashlight cutting through the darkness. She found the light switch and flicked it. A bare bulb overhead flickered to life, illuminating a basement that looked like every basement in every old house. Concrete floor, exposed beams, boxes stacked against walls, the mechanical guts of a house laid bare. But Lisa had been a detective for 15 years. She knew how to see beyond the ordinary, how to spot the thing that didn't belong. And there, in the far corner, behind the water heater and a stack of rotting cardboard boxes, was a door. Not a proper door, with a frame and hinges. Just a section of wall that didn't quite match the rest. A rectangle of wood that had been fitted into place and painted the same gray as the surrounding concrete blocks. Marcus, Lisa called up the stairs. I need that crowbar again. The door came away easier than the false wall upstairs, as if Harold Vance had needed to access this space regularly and hadn't bothered with the same meticulous concealment. Behind it was a room, small, perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, and it had been lived in. 3 sleeping bags lay on the floor, arranged side by side with geometric precision. They were small, child-sized, faded blue and red and green. Next to each sleeping bag sat a plastic cup and a paper plate, clean but yellowed with age. On one wall, someone had drawn in crayon stick figures. A house with a triangle roof and square windows. A sun with rays like spikes. And 3 boys holding hands, each with a round circle head and matchstick body. But it was the other drawings that made Lisa's breath catch. The ones drawn in different crayon, darker, angrier. 3 boys with X's over their mouths. A tall figure looming over them, arms outstretched. And words scrawled repeatedly across the wall in a child's unsteady hand. Help, 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 help. Marcus, who had followed Lisa down, stood in the doorway, his hand over his mouth. Oh my God. Lisa moved into the room carefully, documenting everything with her phone camera before the forensic team arrived. More drawings on the walls. More desperate pleas. But also other things. Tally marks scratched into the concrete, counting days. A collection of food wrappers in one corner, granola bars, juice boxes, packages of crackers, all dated 1989. And on the floor, partially hidden under one of the sleeping bags, a calendar page. October 1989. Someone had circled October 13th in red crayon and marked X's through each subsequent day. 7 X's total, ending on October 19th. They were kept here for at least a week, Lisa realized. 7 days in this dark room while the entire town searched for them above ground, never knowing they were right here, beneath Harold Vance's house, crying for help that never came. She found more evidence. A composition notebook, water-damaged and barely legible, but with pages that had been filled in childish handwriting. Lisa carefully opened it, afraid it might disintegrate in her hands. The first page read, "My name is Daniel Holloway. If something happens to me, please tell my mom I love her, and I tried to get away." Lisa had to stop reading. She handed the notebook to one of the forensic techs, who bagged it with shaking hands. "There's more," Marcus said from another corner. He'd found a toolbox, rusted but intact. Inside were items that turned Lisa's stomach. Rope, still coiled and unused. Duct tape, the roll partially depleted. A bottle of children's Benadryl, half empty. and a handwritten note on yellowed paper. Phase 1 complete. They trust me. Will proceed with Phase 2 as planned. Transport arranged for October 20th. Destroy all evidence before departure. Lisa photographed the note, then bagged it. Phase 2. Transport. The word suggested this was an improvisation. This was planned. Methodical. And if there was a Phase 2, someone else had been involved. She climbed the stairs, her mind racing. Catherine was still outside, sitting on her car hood, waiting. Lisa would have to tell her that her boys had been here. In this house. In that room. Alive at least for a week. But first, she needed to search the rest of the house. The garage was accessed through a side door from the kitchen. It was cluttered with decades of accumulated junk. Paint cans, tools, lumber. The detritus of a life lived in isolation. But in the back corner, covered with a tarp that was thick with dust, Lisa found what she'd been hoping and dreading to find. 3 bicycles. She pulled the tarp away carefully. The bikes were small, made for children. 1 red, 1 blue, 1 yellow. The paint had faded. Rust had claimed the chains and handlebars, but they were otherwise intact. And hanging from each handlebar, tied with string, was a paper tag with a name written in permanent marker. Daniel. Christopher. Matthew. Lisa checked the serial numbers against her phone. The police report from 1989 had listed them. The numbers matched perfectly. These were the Holloway boys' bicycles. The ones they'd been riding home from school that October afternoon. The ones that had vanished along with them. Which meant Harold Vance hadn't just encountered them by chance. He'd taken the bikes too. Hidden them. Kept them as trophies or evidence or both. In a bucket next to the bikes, Lisa found something else. Bike helmets. 3 of them, red, with superhero stickers. Batman. Spider-Man, Superman. Each helmet had a name written in black marker on the inside. Daniel, Christopher, Matthew. She photographed everything. The bikes, the helmets, the position of each item. Then she had them loaded into the evidence van. But it was what she found in the workbench drawer that changed the entire investigation. A journal. Leather-bound, expensive, the kind you buy when you want your thoughts preserved. It was locked, but the lock was cheap and broke easily under the pressure of a screwdriver. Lisa opened it. The first entry was dated September 1989, 1 month before the boys disappeared. She began to read, and with each word, the case transformed from a tragedy into something worse. A plan. Detective Lisa Chun sat at her desk at Riverside Police Department at 11:37 p.m. that Saturday night. She'd sent everyone else home, told them to get rest because tomorrow would be chaos once the media learned what they'd found. But Lisa couldn't rest. Not yet. Not until she'd read every word of Harold Vance's journal. She'd already called the FBI. Cases like this, with evidence of planning and possible trafficking, required federal involvement. They'd arrive Monday morning. But Lisa had the weekend to piece together the story that Harold Vance had written for himself, believing no one would ever read it. The journal contained 187 pages of entries spanning from September 1989 to March 1990. Each entry was dated. Each one was written in the same neat, controlled handwriting Lisa had seen on the note in the toolbox. She read it all, every word. And when she finished, she sat in the silence of her empty office and tried to understand how a human being could do what Harold Vance had done. September 18th, 1989. I've been watching them for 6 months now. The Holloway Triplets. 3 perfect specimens. Identical in every way that matters. They remind me of the son I never had, multiplied into perfection. Catherine Holloway is a careless mother. She lets them walk home from school unsupervised. She trusts the world not to hurt them. That trust will be her undoing and my opportunity. September 29th, 1989. I've begun the preliminary groundwork. The boys know me from school. They trust me. Yesterday, Christopher dropped his pencil in the hallway. I picked it up for him, and he smiled at me with that gap-toothed grin. "Thanks, Mr. Vance," he said. "They're polite children, well raised. They'll follow instructions once they understand the situation." October 5th, 1989. The room in the basement is prepared. Sleeping bags, food, water, entertainment. I've soundproofed it as best I can, though the house is isolated enough that screaming won't matter. I've tested the locks. Everything is secure. Phase 1 begins next week. October 12th, 1989. Tomorrow is the day. I've borrowed a puppy from the shelter under the guise of adopting it. Children cannot resist puppies. I'll wait along their route home, pretend the puppy has escaped, ask them to help me catch it. They'll follow me to the house. Once inside, the door will lock behind them, and phase 1 will be complete. I've prepared a sedative in case they resist. I estimate 30 minutes from first contact to secure containment. Lisa had to stop reading. She went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, she looked tired and old, though she was only 42. But reading the methodical planning of a child predator ages you in ways that sleep can't fix. She returned to her desk and continued. October 13th, 1989, 4:30 p.m. Phase 1 complete. All 3 boys are secure in the basement room. The sedative worked perfectly. They were unconscious within 5 minutes and slept through transport from the garage to the basement. The bicycles are hidden. The puppy has been returned to the shelter. I've cleaned the garage of any evidence. When they wake, I'll explain the new situation. I estimate 48 hours before they stop crying for their mother. October 14th, 1989. They woke at 6 a.m. The crying was intense, but manageable. I explained that their mother had given them to me because she couldn't afford to raise 3 children. Daniel doesn't believe me. He's the smart one, the leader. Christopher is the emotional one. He cried until he made himself sick. Matthew is the quiet one. He watches everything but says little. I gave them breakfast and told them if they behaved, they could watch television. Daniel tried to fight me. I had to sedate him again. I'll need to break his spirit first. October 16th, 1989. The news is reporting the missing. Search parties in the woods. Police going door to door. They came to my house yesterday. I showed them through every room except the basement, which I claimed had flooded and was unsafe. They didn't press the issue. My alibi is solid. The principal confirmed I was at work until 6 p.m., though I actually left at 3:15. Human memory is unreliable, especially when you're someone as unmemorable as a janitor. October 18th, 1989. Daniel tried to escape last night. He'd worked a hole through the drywall using a spoon I'd carelessly left in the room. I found him in the basement, covered in dust, crying for his mother. I had to use discipline. I locked him in the dark storage closet for 6 hours. When I released him, he was more compliant. Christopher and Matthew watched in silence. They're learning that resistance has consequences. October 19th, 1989. Decision made. I cannot keep them here. The risk is too great. The search is intensifying. Helicopters flew over the neighborhood today. I've contacted Thomas as planned. He'll arrive tomorrow night. The payment is arranged, $50,000 cash, my entire savings. Thomas guarantees they'll be placed with families who want children and don't ask questions. New names, new identities, new lives. They'll never remember who they were, and I'll have saved them from a world that would have corrupted them eventually. This is an act of mercy, though no one else will see it that way. October 20th, 1989, 11:47 p.m. Thomas arrived at midnight. He brought a van with tinted windows and a false floor compartment. The boys were sedated for transport. Thomas was professional, efficient. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. I gave him the cash in a duffel bag. He counted it, then loaded the boys into the compartment. "Give me 6 months," he said. "I'll have them placed in 3 different states. New birth certificates. New everything. They'll disappear so completely that even if someone found them, they wouldn't know who they were." The van pulled away at 12:34 a.m. The house feels empty now. I've begun cleaning, destroying evidence, sealing away what I cannot destroy. The backpacks and photograph I'll keep. A memorial to what I did, to the lives I saved from ordinariness. Lisa stopped reading. Her hands were shaking. She picked up her phone and called the FBI contact who'd given her his personal cell number. "We don't have a missing persons case," she told him when he answered. "We have a trafficking case. The boys were sold to someone named Thomas. They could still be alive." There was a pause on the other end. "Then, I'm on my way." Lisa hung up and returned to the journal. There were still months of entries to read. And somewhere in those pages might be the clue that would help them find Daniel, Christopher, and Matthew Holloway. Or whoever they'd become in the 35 years since Harold Vance sold them to a man named Thomas and convinced himself he'd done them a favor. But Lisa was about to discover something in the later journal entries that would change everything. Because Harold Vance hadn't just worked with Thomas once. He'd done this before. Multiple times. Multiple children. And somewhere in America, there were families living with children who'd been stolen decades ago and given new identities. Children who had no idea they'd once been someone else. The Holloway triplets weren't Harold Vance's only victims. They were just the ones whose belongings he'd chosen to keep. FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb arrived in Riverside at 6:30 a.m. Sunday morning, driving through the dawn with Harold Vance's journal on his passenger seat. Lisa had scanned every page and emailed him the files at 2 a.m. He'd read them in his hotel room, and by 4 a.m., he was calling his team. This wasn't just a cold case. This was a network. Marcus was 53, silver-haired, with a methodical mind of someone who'd spent 30 years tracking predators who believed they were too smart to be caught. He specialized in child trafficking cases, the ones that crossed state lines, the ones that required patience and pattern recognition, and a willingness to follow threads that disappeared into darkness. He met Lisa at the Riverside Police Department. She looked like she hadn't slept, because she hadn't. "Tell me about Thomas," Marcus said, spreading files across the conference room table. "That's all we have," Lisa admitted. "A first name in a journal. Harold Vance doesn't give a last name, doesn't describe him beyond professional. But he paid him $50,000 in cash to take the boys." Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up a database. Thomas isn't a common name in trafficking networks, but there was a man we investigated in the mid-1990s. Thomas Garrett, former social worker who lost his license in 1984 for falsifying adoption records. We believed he ran an underground operation moving children between states and selling them to couples desperate to adopt. "Did you catch him?" Lisa asked. "Eventually. 1995. He was operating out of Montana by then. We arrested him, and he served 12 years. Released in 2007. Dropped off our radar shortly after." Marcus pulled up a mugshot. "Is this your Thomas?" Lisa looked at the photograph. A man in his 40s, thin face, cold eyes, the kind of bland appearance that lets you disappear in a crowd. "I don't know," she admitted. Harold's journal never describes him. But the MO matches. Professional. Efficient. Falsified documents. New identities. Marcus nodded. Thomas Garrett specialized in creating complete identity packages. Birth certificates, social security numbers, vaccination records, school transcripts. He didn't just sell children. He erased who they were and rebuilt them as someone else. So the Holloway boys could be anywhere, Lisa said. Living under different names, maybe not even remembering they were stolen. Possibly. Trauma-induced amnesia is common in cases like this, especially when children are very young. 8 years old is borderline. They might have fragmented memories, dreams they can't explain, but no clear recollection of their previous lives. Marcus closed his laptop. We need to find Thomas Garrett. He's the key to finding those boys. But Lisa was looking at something else in Harold's journal, something she'd marked with a sticky note. There's more, she said. Look at this entry from November 1989. Marcus read it aloud. November 12, 1989. Thomas called today. The boys have been placed successfully. 2 went to a family in Oregon, 1 to a family in Colorado. Thomas said they're adapting well to their new environments. He asked if I had any other opportunities. I told him I'd be in touch. The money is gone, but the satisfaction remains. I've saved 3 children from mediocrity. Perhaps I'll save more. Marcus looked up sharply. He was planning to do it again. Lisa nodded grimly. Keep reading. March 3rd, 1990. I've identified a new candidate. 7-year-old boy walks home alone from school. Mother works late shifts. Easy target. But I'll wait. Rushing leads to mistakes. June 15th, 1990. The opportunity presented itself naturally. The boy's name is Michael Chun. I've made initial contact. He trusts me. Phase 1 preparations beginning. Lisa's voice was quiet. There's no entry after that about Michael Chun. No confirmation he went through with it. But I searched. Michael Chun, age 7, disappeared from Seattle in June 1990. Case went cold. Marcus was already typing, pulling up missing children databases, cross-referencing Harold Vance's movements. If Harold Vance was traveling to Seattle, Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. Then he'd need time off from work, employment records, vacation days. Lisa had already pulled them. June 18th to 25th, 1990. He told the school he was visiting family in Washington State. He had no family. Marcus looked at her. How many missing children cases are there in towns where Harold Vance took vacation between 1989 and 2003? They spent the next 6 hours building a timeline. Harold's employment records, his vacation days, his credit card statements showing purchases in different cities, and then cross-referencing with missing children databases. The pattern was undeniable. September 1991. Harold vacations in Denver. 2 weeks later, a 6-year-old boy named James Patterson disappears while walking home from school. Case goes cold. April 1993. Harold vacations in Portland. A 7-year-old girl named Sophia Martinez disappears from a playground. Case goes cold. October 1994. Harold vacations in Phoenix. Twin boys age 8 disappear from their backyard. Case goes cold. March 1996. Harold vacations in Sacramento. An 8-year-old boy named Lucas Kim disappears from a shopping mall. Case goes cold. The list continued. 11 different cities. 14 missing children. All between 1989 and 2002. All during periods when Harold Vance was on vacation. Jesus Christ, Lisa whispered. He wasn't a one-time offender. He was a serial trafficker. Marcus leaned back in his chair. And Thomas Garrett handled every transaction. Which means Garrett knows where every one of those children ended up. So we find Garrett, Lisa said. We find Garrett, Marcus agreed. And we bring 14 missing children home. Finding a man who'd spent his life making people disappear was harder than finding the people he'd disappeared. Thomas Garrett's last known address was in Billings, Montana, in 2008. He'd rented a small apartment under his real name for 6 months, then vanished. No forwarding address. No employment records. No credit cards or bank accounts. Marcus put out feelers through his FBI network, contacted parole officers, checked aliases, ran facial recognition through traffic cameras and security footage from across the western United States. Nothing. Thomas Garrett had become a ghost. But Marcus had been hunting ghosts for 30 years. He knew how to make them solid again. He started with the one thing people can't change: fingerprints. Garrett's prints were on file from his 1995 arrest. Marcus entered them into every database he had access to. DMV records, border crossings, TSA screenings, and got a hit. May 2010. Fingerprints matching Thomas Garrett were used to obtain a driver's license in Boise, Idaho, under the name Harold Mason. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Thomas had taken the first name of his partner in crime as an alias. Marcus pulled the DMV photo. Garrett looked older, grayer, but it was definitely him. The address listed was a rural route outside Boise. I'm going to Idaho, Marcus told Lisa. Want to come? Lisa was on a plane with him 3 hours later. The address led them to a trailer park 40 miles outside Boise. The kind of place where people go to disappear, where nobody asks questions and everyone minds their own business. Unit 47 was a single-wide trailer, pale blue, with rust stains and a sagging porch. A motorcycle was parked outside, covered with a tarp. The mailbox said Mason. Marcus knocked. No answer. He knocked again louder and identified himself. FBI, open up. Movement inside. Footsteps. Then the door opened. Thomas Garrett stood in the doorway, older and thinner than his mugshot, wearing a stained undershirt and jeans. He looked at Marcus and Lisa with the weary expression of someone who'd been expecting this knock for years. Finally, he said, "Took you long enough." They arrested him without incident, read him his rights, transported him to the Boise FBI field office. And then Marcus sat across from him in an interrogation room and placed Harold Vance's journal on the table. "You know what this is?" Marcus asked. Thomas looked at it, nodded. Harold kept a journal. "I told him not to. I told him writing things down was stupid. But he was a romantic. Thought he was doing something noble." "Noble," Lisa repeated, her voice flat. "You took children from their families and sold them." "I gave children to families who wanted them," Thomas corrected. "I moved them from situations of potential abuse or neglect into loving homes." "The Holloway boys weren't being abused," Marcus said. "They had a mother who loved them. They had a home." Thomas shrugged. Harold convinced himself they'd be better off. "I didn't ask too many questions. I provided a service." Marcus leaned forward. "Where did they go?" "Daniel, Christopher, and Matthew Holloway." "Where did you take them?" Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You offering a deal?" "That depends on what you give us." "Full immunity. For everything. All the kids, all the families. I tell you everything, and I walk away." Marcus wanted to punch him, wanted to drag him across the table and make him understand the suffering he'd caused. But instead, he kept his voice level. "I can't promise immunity, but I can promise the prosecutor will hear that you cooperated. It'll matter at sentencing." Thomas considered this. Then he nodded. "Get me a pen and paper." He spent the next 6 hours writing. Names, dates, locations, the families who'd purchased children, the lawyers who'd falsified documents, the social workers who'd looked the other way, and most importantly, the new identities he'd created for the 14 children Harold Vance had delivered to him over 13 years. The Holloway triplets were listed near the top. Daniel Holloway to David Walsh, placed with the Walsh family in Portland, Oregon, October 24th, 1989. Christopher Holloway to Michael Preston, placed with the Preston family in Denver, Colorado, October 27th, 1989. Matthew Holloway to James Rivera, placed with the Rivera family in Sacramento, California, October 30th, 1989. Marcus stared at the names. 35 years ago, 3 identical boys had been split apart and given to 3 different families in 3 different states. They'd grown up separately, never knowing they had brothers, never knowing they'd been stolen. "Are they still with these families?" Marcus asked. "How should I know?" Thomas said. "I placed them in 1989. Anything could have happened since then. They could be dead. They could have been adopted out again. They could be in prison or married, with kids, or living on the street. I gave them new lives. What they did with those lives isn't my problem." Lisa wanted to throw something at him, but instead, she took the list and stepped out of the interrogation room. She called the Portland, Denver, and Sacramento FBI offices. "I need you to locate 3 individuals," she said. "And when you find them, I need you to tell them very carefully that they were stolen as children, that they have a mother who's been looking for them for 35 years, and that it's time to come home." But finding the men who'd once been the Holloway triplets would raise a question no one had considered. What do you tell someone when you inform them that their entire life has been a lie? That the parents who raised them purchased them from a child trafficker? That somewhere, a woman they don't remember has been waiting for them? And most complicated of all, what happens when 3 identical strangers who share DNA but not memory are brought together for the first time in 35 years? FBI Special Agent Jennifer Cole knocked on the door of a modest 2-story house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. She'd been given one job: locate David Walsh and confirm his identity. DNA testing would come later. But first, they needed to see if the man Thomas Garrett had placed in this city 35 years ago was still here. The door opened. A man in his early 40s stood there, tall and lean, with sandy brown hair going gray at the temples. He had kind eyes and a confused smile. "Can I help you?" he asked. Jennifer showed her badge. "Are you David Walsh?" The smile faded. "Yes." "What's this about?" "May I come in?" This is going to take some time to explain. David's wife, Jennifer learned, was at work. His 2 daughters were at school. He was a freelance graphic designer working from home, and he invited her into his office where sketches and computer screens filled every surface. "Mr. Walsh," Jennifer began, and then she told him everything. She told him about Harold Vance and Thomas Garrett, about 3 boys who disappeared in 1989, about a journal that documented their abduction and sale, and about the possibility, the strong possibility, that David Walsh was actually Daniel Holloway. David listened in silence. When she finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I don't remember being anyone else." "Do you remember your childhood?" Jennifer asked gently. David hesitated. "I remember. I was told I was adopted when I was 8, that my biological parents died in a car accident. I have no memories before waking up in a hospital room with the Walshes standing over me. They said I had amnesia from the trauma." "Did you ever question that story?" "No. Why would I? They were my parents. They loved me. They gave me a good life." Jennifer showed him the Polaroid that had been hidden in Harold Vance's house. 3 identical boys smiling at the camera. David stared at it. His hand shook slightly as he held the photograph. "I've seen these faces before," he whispered. "In dreams. I always thought it was my brain creating imaginary brothers. I was an only child, and I used to wish I had siblings. I thought my subconscious was giving me what I wanted." "They weren't imaginary," Jennifer said softly. "Those are your brothers, Christopher and Matthew. Your triplets." David set down the photograph. "What do you need from me?" "DNA," Jennifer said, "to confirm. And then, if you're willing, there's someone who wants to meet you." In Denver, FBI agent Robertson found Michael Preston teaching American history to a classroom of bored teenagers at a public high school. He waited until the class ended, until the students filed out in their typical chaos of backpacks and shouted conversations. "Mr. Preston?" Robert approached the desk where Michael was grading papers. Michael looked up. He was the same age as David Walsh, with the same sandy brown hair and similar features, though his face was rounder, softer. He wore glasses and had a kind smile. "If this is about the field trip permission slips, I submitted them to the office yesterday," Michael said. Robert showed his badge. "I need to speak with you privately." They sat in an empty classroom. Robert told the story again. The abduction, the trafficking, the possibility that Michael Preston was actually Christopher Holloway. Michael's first response was laughter. "I think you have the wrong person. I've been Michael Preston my entire life." "Do you remember being 8 years old?" Robert asked. The laughter faded. I was adopted. My parents told me I was in foster care, that my biological parents had given me up. I have some memories of that time, but they're fragmented, confusing. "Do you remember 2 other boys? Boys who looked exactly like you?" Michael went very still. "I have this recurring dream," he said slowly. 3 of us sitting in a dark room, holding hands, telling each other it's going to be okay. I've had that dream since I was a kid. I always thought it was just anxiety or something." Robert showed him the photograph. Michael's glasses fogged with tears. "That's me," he whispered, pointing to the middle boy. "I know that's me. I recognize the shirt. I remember that shirt." "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Robert asked. Michael nodded, unable to speak. In Sacramento, FBI agent Lisa Martinez found James Rivera working at an architectural firm in the downtown district. She waited until his lunch break approached him in the lobby. James was different from his brothers, more guarded. When Lisa showed her badge, his first instinct was suspicion. "What's this about?" he asked, arms crossed. "Can we talk somewhere private?" They sat in his car in the parking garage. Lisa told the story. Watched his face change from suspicion to disbelief to something harder to read. "You're saying my parents bought me," James said flatly. "Your parents may not have known," Lisa said carefully. Thomas Garrett was skilled at creating believable stories. They may have thought it was a legitimate private adoption. But it wasn't. No. James stared through the windshield at nothing. "I always felt like something was wrong. Like I didn't fit in my own life. My parents, the Riveras, they loved me, I think. But there was always this distance. Like they were afraid to get too close. I thought it was me. That I was broken somehow." Lisa showed him the photograph. James took it with steady hands. He studied it for a long time. "I remember this," he said finally. "Not the photo, but the feeling. Being part of something. Being connected to something bigger than myself. And then that feeling was gone, and I've spent my whole life trying to find it again." "You can find it again," Lisa said. "Your brothers are alive. And your mother has been looking for you for 35 years. James wiped his eyes. "What's her name?" "Catherine Holloway." "Catherine," James repeated, testing the word. "Does she know that we're alive?" "She's about to." Detective Lisa Chun stood on Catherine Holloway's front porch for the third time in 2 weeks. The first time had been to tell her they'd found her boy's belongings. The second time had been to tell her that her sons had been trafficked, possibly sold to families. This time, she was going to tell Catherine that after 35 years, her sons were alive. Catherine opened the door. She looked older, more tired. The discoveries had taken their toll. But when she saw Lisa's face, something changed in her expression. "You found them," Catherine whispered. "We found them," Lisa confirmed. Catherine's legs gave out. Lisa caught her, helped her to the couch, sat beside her while Catherine cried tears that were equal parts grief and joy and disbelief. "Are they okay?" Catherine finally asked. "Are they healthy? Are they safe?" "They're alive and well," Lisa said. "They're living under different names in 3 different states. They don't remember you. They don't remember each other. But they exist." "What are their names now?" "David Walsh in Portland. Michael Preston in Denver. James Rivera in Sacramento." Catherine repeated the names like a prayer. "Can I see them?" "They've all agreed to DNA testing. Once we confirm their identities, we'll arrange a meeting. But Catherine, you need to understand. They've lived their entire adult lives as different people. They have families, careers, lives they've built. This is going to be complicated for them." "I don't care," Catherine said fiercely. "I don't care if they remember me or not. I don't care if they want to keep their new names. I just need to see them. I need to hold them one time and tell them I never stopped looking." Lisa squeezed her hand. "You'll get that chance." The DNA tests were processed at 3 different labs to ensure accuracy. The results came back within 72 hours. David Walsh, 99.97% match to Catherine Holloway. Confirmed biological son. Michael Preston, 99.97% match to Catherine Holloway. Confirmed biological son. James Rivera, 99.97% match to Catherine Holloway. Confirmed biological son. Additionally, genetic testing confirmed that all 3 men were identical triplets, sharing 100% of their DNA. Marcus Webb called each man personally to deliver the results. "Your legal name is Daniel Holloway," he told David. "You were 8 years old when you were abducted. You have 2 brothers who are genetically identical to you. And you have a mother who has been waiting for you." David sat in his office, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. "What happens now?" "That's up to you," Marcus said. "You can meet your biological family or not. You can reclaim your original identity or keep the name you've lived with. This is your choice." "What about my brothers?" David asked. "Do they know?" "They know. And they want to meet you." In Denver, Michael held the phone to his ear and listened to Marcus explain that he was Christopher Holloway, that he had 2 identical brothers, that his entire childhood had been constructed on lies. "Does my mother know?" Michael asked. "The woman who raised me. Does she know what she did?" "We're investigating that," Marcus said. But our preliminary belief is that the families who adopted you were deceived as well. They thought they were getting children through legitimate channels. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, Michael said quietly. In Sacramento, James listened to the confirmation that he was Matthew Holloway, and his first thought was relief. I'm not crazy, he said aloud. All these years of feeling like I didn't belong, like something was missing. I wasn't crazy. You weren't crazy, Marcus agreed. And now you have a chance to find what's been missing. When can I meet them? James asked. My brothers and my mother. When? We're arranging a meeting in Seattle. Neutral territory. Next week. Will you be there? I'll be there, James promised. They chose a private room at a hotel in Seattle, halfway between all three cities. Catherine flew in from Connecticut with Lisa Chun. David drove down from Portland. Michael flew in from Denver. James drove up from Sacramento. The room was simple, a round table, comfortable chairs, large windows overlooking the city. Coffee and water were provided. Tissues, too, though no one mentioned why they might be needed. Catherine arrived first. She sat by the window, hands folded in her lap, trying to control her breathing. She was 67 years old. Her sons would be 43. They'd lived entire lives without her. They were strangers. But they were her boys. David arrived second. He paused in the doorway, looking at Catherine. She stood slowly, afraid to move too quickly, afraid to scare him away. Daniel, she said softly. David, he corrected gently. I go by David now. She nodded, accepting this. David, then. It's good to meet you. They shook hands formally, awkwardly. Then David said, You have my eyes. Or I have yours, I guess. Catherine laughed through tears. You do. All three of you do. Michael arrived 10 minutes later. He stood beside David, and the resemblance was startling. Not identical anymore. Not after 35 years of different lives, but unmistakably related. Christopher. Catherine asked. Michael, he said. But I remember Christopher. It sounds familiar, like a name I used to know. James was last. He walked into the room and stopped, staring at David and Michael. Jesus, he breathed. It's like looking in a mirror. The three brothers stood together, mirrors of each other, seeing themselves reflected in strangers' faces. They didn't touch at first, just stared, studying features, mapping similarities. We have the same ears, David said. Same nose, Michael added. Same terrible posture, James finished, and they all laughed nervously. Catherine watched them, memorizing every detail. They were so different from the 8-year-old boys she'd lost. Taller, older, marked by time and experience. But they were hers. She could see them in these men. Could see Daniel's serious expression in David's face, Christopher's gentle smile in Michael's eyes, Matthew's quiet observation in James's careful stance. Thank you for coming, she said. I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't remember me. But I need you to know that I never stopped looking. Every single day, for 35 years, I thought about you. I searched for you. I never gave up. David stepped forward. We have questions. I'll answer anything I can, Catherine promised. They sat at the table. For the next 3 hours, they talked. Catherine told them about their childhood, about the house they'd lived in, about how they'd insisted on wearing matching clothes, about how they'd had their own language that only they understood. The brothers told her about their lives. David talked about his wife and daughters, his career as a designer, his love of hiking. Michael described his students, his passion for teaching, his small apartment filled with books. James spoke about his architecture work, his struggles with feeling disconnected, his recent divorce. We've all had different lives, Michael said, but I think we've all felt the same thing. Like something was missing. Each other, Catherine said. You were missing each other. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the formality began to fade. The brothers moved closer together, their body language synchronizing in that uncanny way twins and triplets do. They discovered shared gestures, similar mannerisms, the same laugh. This is so weird, James said at one point. I'm watching you two move, and it's like watching myself. Identical DNA, David said. Even after 35 years apart, we're still connected. Michael looked at Catherine. Do you want to be called Mom? Catherine's breath caught. I don't want to push you. You have mothers. The women who raised you are your mothers. But you're our mother too, Michael said. Biologically. And emotionally. Because you never stopped looking for us. I think you've earned the title. Catherine cried then, and this time it was purely joy. The story broke nationally the following week. Stolen triplets, found alive after 35 years. It dominated news cycles. The photographs of 8-year-old Daniel, Christopher, and Matthew next to recent photos of David, Michael, and James. The story of Harold Vance and Thomas Garrett. The investigation into how many other children had been trafficked. The Walsh, Preston, and Rivera families all released statements through lawyers. None of them had known the adoptions were illegal. All of them had believed the stories Thomas Garrett had told them. They were cooperating fully with investigators and hoped their sons would forgive them. David, Michael, and James released a joint statement. We are grateful to have found each other and our biological mother after 35 years. We are processing the complicated reality of our situation. We love the families who raised us, and we are building relationships with our biological family. We ask for privacy as we navigate this new chapter of our lives. Thomas Garrett was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison for child trafficking. At 71, it was effectively a life sentence. He showed no remorse at his sentencing hearing. Harold Vance's house at 847 Pinecrest Drive was purchased by the town of Riverside and converted into a center for missing and exploited children. Marcus and Sophia Chin donated it willingly, wanting something good to come from a place where so much horror had been planned. The FBI's investigation into the other children Harold Vance had trafficked led to the identification of 6 more victims, now adults, living under false identities. Each reunion was complicated, messy, filled with joy and grief in equal measure. Matthew Holloway stood in her backyard garden, her hands deep in the soil, planting roses. It was October, the anniversary month of her son's disappearance, and now their return. A car pulled into her driveway. Then another. Then a third. David stepped out first, his wife and daughters with him. Michael emerged from the second car alone. James climbed out of the third, carrying a bakery box. They'd been meeting monthly, these 4 people bound by blood and trauma and time. Sometimes the meetings were easy, filled with laughter and shared stories. Sometimes they were hard, weighted with grief for the years they'd lost. But they kept meeting, kept trying, kept building something that resembled a family. I brought cake, James announced. It's somebody's birthday, right? All of ours, Michael said. Our birthday is in 3 weeks. Then, this is advance cake, James decided. Catherine stood, brushing dirt from her hands. Her sons, her beautiful sons, walked toward her across the lawn. They were 43 years old. They were strangers and family both. They had different names and different lives and different memories. But they were here. They were alive. They were home. David reached her first. He'd been the most reserved, the slowest to warm to the idea of Catherine as his mother. But today, without warning, he pulled her into a hug. Happy anniversary, Mom, he said. Anniversary? Catherine asked, confused. Of getting us back, David explained. 6 months ago today, we found out who we really were. Michael and James joined the hug, and Catherine found herself surrounded by her sons, held by the boys she'd lost and the men they'd become. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Michael asked. For never giving up on us, James said, understanding. Never, Catherine agreed. Not for one single day. They went inside, this family that had been broken and was slowly knitting itself back together. They ate advance birthday cake and drank coffee and talked about ordinary things, work and weather and plans for the holidays. And sometimes, when the light hit just right, Catherine could see them as they'd been. 3 8-year-old boys with matching smiles and endless possibility. The boys who'd been stolen but never destroyed. The boys who'd been separated but were forever brothers. The boys who'd come home. The house at 847 Pinecrest Drive stands today as the Holloway Center for Missing Children. In the lobby, there's a photograph of 3 boys smiling at the camera, and beneath it, a plaque that reads, "In memory of all children stolen from their families. May they all find their way home." Daniel Christopher and Matthew Holloway, known to the world as David Walsh, Michael Preston, and James Rivera, continue to navigate the complicated reality of their dual identities. They remain close, speaking daily, visiting monthly. Catherine Holloway lives in a small house in Riverside, Connecticut, surrounded by photographs of her sons at every age. The missing years are filled in now with school photos and graduation pictures that their adoptive family shared. Her refrigerator holds drawings from her grandchildren. She turned 68 this year. She gardens every day. She volunteers at the Holloway Center, helping other families navigate the nightmare of missing children. And every October 13th, she stands in her backyard and lights 3 candles. One for each of her sons. Not in mourning anymore, but in celebration. They were lost, but now they're found. They were broken, but now they're healing. They were stolen, but love brought them home. And in the end, that's all that matters. The Holloway case is closed, but thousands of children remain missing across the United States. If you've been moved by this story, consider supporting organizations dedicated to finding missing children and reuniting families. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of mystery, tragedy, and hope, subscribe to Ultimate Crime Stories. Hit that notification bell, because the truth is always worth uncovering, no matter how long it takes. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, every missing person is someone's loved one. Every cold case is a family waiting for answers. And sometimes, against all odds, those answers finally come.